Good evening and welcome to PJTN Online. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and I want to thank you for joining us again this evening. We've got an exciting, very interesting program ahead for you this evening, but I want to tell you I really appreciate those of you who we heard back from, some of our viewers and friends on Facebook who joined us on Daystar yesterday. I was in Dallas. For those of you who were not aware, I was in Dallas, Texas, filming on Daystar with Joni and Marcus Lamb, and of course with the Tabletop crew. So we had a great evening, a great day, and I got a lot of great feedback from those of you who were able to tune in. So thank you for following us and for joining us, and thank you for being here tonight. So I want to welcome some of our new guests who are here for the first time. If you're not familiar with Proclaiming Justice to the Nations or PJTN Online, PJTN's mission is to educate Christians about their biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of the growing threat of anti-Semitism. We accomplish that mission by producing award-winning programs and documentary films to educate Christians around the globe. As a result of all of our media programming and our relationship with the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, we have 21 global media partners who broadcast our program to their audience. We are now reaching 2.6 billion potential viewers around the world. That's 200 nations. And it's all possible because of our friends and our supporters at PJTN. So thank you so much for making that possible. I also want to remind you that if you are interested in helping us to make programs like this one available, that you too can become a PJTN Watchman for just $20 a month. You can join with us, partner with us, so that we can produce more educational programs like this one. And as I always hear from our viewers, whether it's here on PJTN Online, whether it's our Focus on Israel show, or whether it's my guest appearances on networks like Daystar, people are very excited to hear the information. Christians who know their Bible, who've been studying their Bible, know God's promise, God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his promise to fulfill that covenant, and what our role is as Christians. And of course, at the end of the program, we're going to talk a little bit about the mailbag. We're going to hear from some of the people who have responded to some of our programs, PJTN Online, our Focus on Israel show, and our documentaries. So I want to encourage you to stay with us, because like I said, we've got a lot of great information to share with you tonight. And of course, remember, keep in mind that we're providing this information for you so you can share this information with your family and your friends. And that way they can be better informed. You become a PJTN Watchman, we help educate you and give you the materials and the information, and you can share it amongst your family and friends. Our goal this year is to sign up 5,000 new PJTN Watchmen. That's our goal for 2018 at just $20 a month to help us take more programming to a global Christian audience as we see the rise of anti-Semitism. Last week, for those of you who tuned in, we launched our 40 days of prayer for Israel as we're leading up to the anniversary, the 70th anniversary of the rebirth of the modern state of Israel. You know, I've been engaged in a Twitter war, if you will, online because of this whole battle, this war that's going on with Hamas attacking Israel. In fact, just as we were coming on to the show tonight, there were sirens that were executed in Israel because of missile attacks coming from Gaza into Israel, into some of the southern border cities with Gaza. This is not unfamiliar to most of these communities like Sderot, who usually get the barrage, the brunt of Hamas's anger and hostility in their community. It's a very difficult environment to have to raise a family in, to live in. It's very sad, but this community, once again, is under siege and under attack, a missile attack by Hamas. So we launched that 40-day a prayer to encourage Christians around the world to be praying for Israel, because as this battle with Hamas continues to heat up. And as we've seen historically in these little skirmishes that start off as small and, not as volatile, they end up becoming a volatile situation. We see missiles again being launched. Hezbollah last week mentioned that they were going to attack Haifa and Tel Aviv from the north. We've also seen over the recent months the Syrians. We've seen missiles. We had an Israeli jet that was shot down up on the Golan Heights. So we're seeing the escalation of a potential all-out war. And Hamas has made it very clear that they are going to continue this effort. They're going to continue this push until May 15th, which May 14th, as many of you know, is the anniversary of the rebirth of the modern state of Israel, when David Ben-Gurion made that famous speech in the Independence Hall in Tel Aviv. So if you would be interested in joining us in prayer, if you're not on our mailing list at PJTN, I encourage you to go to pjtn.org, sign up to get our newsletters and announcements. That way you'll get our 40 days of prayer. Every day we have a new scripture verse. We have another prayer request to focus on. And we've seen some miraculous things happening. In fact, a couple of days ago, last week, we reported that as we have been launching this prayer, and we've been joining our prayers with Christians all over the world, Christians and Jews who've been praying for Israel. When Hamas set fire to 10,000 tires in Gaza, the smoke, the acrid smoke that could cause an environmental disaster, instead of it flowing because of the Mediterranean breezes into Israel proper, there was a airstream that just came out of nowhere that pushed the smoke and the odors back into Gaza. So what Hamas intended to do with this horrible smoke ended up backfiring on them and going back on them. So that's the power of prayer, ladies and gentlemen. And so we ask you to continue your prayers and to join us in praying. And if you have prayer requests, I just want to remind you, we have a prayer team here at PJTN, and we're here to pray for you. We're praying for Israel. We're praying for our Jewish brethren, for their protection, especially in the land of Israel. We're praying for our Jewish brethren in Europe with anti-Semitism on the rise, as well as here in the United States. But we also want to pray for you. We all have needs, whether it's financial, whether it's health, whether it's a relationship. We're here to pray for you. So please join us. Send us an email at comments@pjtn.org with your prayer request, or if the Lord has put a prayer on your heart to pray for Israel, please share it with us so that we can share it with our intercessors all over the globe. I want to just, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are getting ready to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the rebirth of the modern state of Israel. And, who would have guessed that in our lifetime that we would see biblical prophecy come to fruition? The prophet Isaiah said, ask the Lord, can a nation be born in a day? And no other nation, like the nation of Israel, did that prophecy fulfilled. And we saw it when the United Nations came together November 29th, 1947, and they voted to partition out of the Turkish Ottoman Empire, the former Ottoman Empire. They decided to take a piece of land, a strip of land, to give to the Jewish people following the horrific events of the Holocaust in Europe by the Nazis. And so that's how, it was out of the ashes of the Holocaust that God established this little tiny nation in one day. So I hope that you'll join us in celebrating the 70th anniversary. And with a one-time gift, we have a book, Israel Rising, and our documentary, Israel Indivisible, that we will send to you. Israel Rising book is a beautiful illustration of over 200 photos taken, back even as late as the mid-1800s. And modern day photos are presented in the book from the same position of the older photo with the modern day version. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the most incredible thing to see these images, to see the nation that came to life when the Jewish people decided to actually come back into the land, how it responded, and now to see these cities overwhelmed with families and homes and businesses, and it's just, and schools. It's just amazing. In just 100 years, of course, we're celebrating the 70th anniversary, but really the ingathering started about 100 years ago, and so it's just amazing to see. But the documentary, Israel Indivisible, The Case for the Ancient Homeland, is the definitive documentary that makes the argument for Israel's historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical rights to her ancient homeland. That's why, it's so important that we reach Christians and educate Christians. And it's not just Christians now. Even members of the Jewish community, we get emails from our Jewish brethren who thank us for the work that we're doing. But they're joining with us in prayer, and they're joining with us in agreement, believing the Word of God and believing that the covenant and the promise that God made to Abraham is still in effect. I also want to just encourage you to purchase the book and the DVD as a gift, maybe for friends. Maybe, your pastor who may not be preaching or teaching about Israel from the pulpit. This would be a great gift to give to him to see, so that maybe God would work on his heart to bring this message to your congregation as well. Of course, you will receive, the book will be autographed, so you will get an autographed copy of the book. And moving on, let me see. So in order to order, of course, you have to go to the website. You got to go to PJTN.org and make your donation, just $70, and you'll have your own 70th anniversary edition of Israel Rising and Israel Indivisible. All right, so, and then, of course, don't forget to sign up for prayer, because we need the intercessors to pray with us. So I want to talk just a little bit about the program. For those of you who are not familiar with PJTN Online, if this is your first time here, again, we want to welcome you. Those of you who've been here before, you know the routine, but it's important to repeat it. This program was really designed with you in mind, because I find wherever I go, Christians come up to me after I speak, and they share with me how they learned things that they didn't know. And they engage in conversation, they ask questions to help them understand this biblical role, the role that we play in this hour. God did not bring us into the world 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. He brought us into the world now, after the rebirth of the modern state of Israel. And he equipped us with all the gifts and the talents that we have, because he wants us to use those gifts and those talents to uphold his truth, to uphold the covenant that God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We are living in the last days, ladies and gentlemen. And it's important for us as Christians to understand that, but also understand what is our role. We're not just here to exist. God gave us life. He gave us talent. He gave my husband and I this ability to create these award-winning programs and films to educate more Christians, especially at this hour, for such a time as this, just like Esther. So you have an opportunity to ask questions, and all you have to do is, you're watching on Facebook, just send us a message, and a couple times during the program, I'm going to check those questions or those comments that you want to leave, and I'm going to share them with our audience. This helps us engage in the conversation. It helps us to own and understand what's going on. And your question really could be a question that somebody else, another viewer, has but may not ask. But your question may reinforce to them that they're not the only ones who think the way you do, or that the Lord is responding or putting something on their heart that they might want to share. And your sharing just might encourage them to share as well. Again, visit pjtn.org, Sign up to get on our mailing list. It's important that you stay informed and educated so you can educate your family and your friends in your community. Of course, like us on Facebook. You know, I don't know if you all, just as a little aside, I know Zuckerberg is in Washington. He's been interviewed by the Senate and House committees addressing the issue of Facebook. And I want you to know that PJTN's Facebook page is operating, but I have personally been shut down. Facebook will not allow me to sign on. And of course, my Congresswoman, Marsha Blackburn, is representing me in Washington, D.C. and representing PJTN to get to the bottom of why I've been locked out. It's been 3 months. And of course, I can't get any response from Facebook. They don't make it easy to communicate. Ironically, they're a communication engine, Facebook is, but their communication skills with the people that pay them, because we do buy a lot of advertising with Facebook every year, but the people that pay them, you can't communicate with them. So anyhow, so hopefully we'll get to the bottom of this, and eventually I'll have access to my own Facebook page so I can post more articles, original articles and content. So anyhow, but please like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. If you're following me on Twitter right now, you'll see I've launched a Twitter war, and I've been engaging some of these Hamas terrorists and Hamas sympathizers and collaborators on Twitter. So I hope you'll join me in the conversation. All you have to do is go to Twitter and start following PJTN. Also, we've got a YouTube channel, and we've got a video or Vimeo channel as well. So I hope you'll go online, go to YouTube and Vimeo and sign up to get our videos so you can watch some of the past programs that you've missed here with PJTN Online. Okay, so I think that covers that. And let me just see before we move on to the next segment of the program if we have any questions from the audience. Let's see. And I'm having, so now I'm blocked. Sorry, the content isn't available right now. So my team will let me know if they get any questions from you, any feedback, and we will be sure to bring your Facebook must be watching. To hear, because I didn't give them a good plug. But anyhow, but our production team will keep me informed if there's any questions or comments at the end. They'll let me know, and we will get those to you. Tonight's program, we're going to discuss the Holocaust Remembrance Day. For those of you who are not aware, at sundown today in Israel started Holocaust Remembrance Day. And they typically, traditionally, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, it is a solemn memorial to the 6 million Jews who lost their lives under the Nazis, under Adolf Hitler. And typically one of the things that is done at noon, at 12 p.m. on Holocaust Remembrance Day, the Israelis sound an alarm. It's much like the alarm that you hear when there's an emergency, if the tornado warning, but they sound the alarm for 2 minutes to remember the 6 million Jews who lost their lives, who perished because of the Nazis. And of course, they stop wherever they are, whether they're in a store, they stop moving. When that alarm sounds, they solemnly reflect and remember that it was on the backs of those who perished that the Israelis are able to live in their own homeland now. And the Israeli community, the Jewish community, is very mindful of that, of the sacrifice that was made by that generation that came before them. And there are many Jews who are not alive who never did get to see the state of Israel. So, but they stand, whether it's, if they're in their car, they actually stop their vehicle, even in the middle of the highway, the freeway, and they get out of their car and they all stand there. And as soon as the alarm is done, everyone goes back to their lives, to their business, to their daily routines. So it's a very difficult day, but it's a day that Israelis should not only memorialize, but even the Gentile nations, even the nations of the world should remember. Because remember, ladies and gentlemen, it was the nations of the world who stood by and allowed Adolf Hitler to come to power. And of course, it was the nations of the world that had the opportunity to rescue Jews and didn't. Some collaborated. We saw some of the news out of Poland a couple of months ago, earlier this year, where Poland is now revising its history and revising the role that Poland played in the Holocaust. And although the concentration camps in Poland were not Polish concentration camps, they were Nazi concentration camps, there were many Poles who participated in murdering Jews. There's one city that I always think of when I think about, you know, a community that turned its back on its Jews, and that was Jedwabne, which was a town of maybe 3,000, a little over 3,000 people. But these Catholic Poles lived alongside their Jewish neighbors, and there were 1,600 Jews who were rounded up by their neighbors, by their employers, by their employees, by their friends, by their classmates. And they were rounded up and placed in a barn, and the barn was set fire by the very people that they lived next door to. This is outrageous that this could have even happened. Where is humanity in all of this? Why did the world turn its back? And my question, because of our mission as to Christians, where was the church? Why didn't the Christians speak up? Where were the pastors? You know, we know about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, we know about Martin Niemöller, we know about Corrie ten Boom. They were Christians who risked their own lives and the lives of their families, and some perished. Dietrich Bonhoeffer ended up dying. He was murdered 4 days before the Allies liberated Germany. But he was in a prison, and he was shot and killed. Where was the church? Why didn't the church respond? And my question, if the church could be silent back then and allow 6 million Jews to be murdered, can the church be silent again today? And I would say to you, yes. Because if you look at the conditions, look at the environment of Nazi Germany. Germany at the time was an educated Christian nation. You could call it a Judeo-Christian nation because there were Jews who lived in Germany as well. But there were 6 million Jews who were killed. Where was the response from the church? Why didn't they speak up? They were educated. There were parents who sent their kids to university in German schools because they were so progressive. So how could they be so progressive and turn their back on humanity, on another human being? And remember, it was 6 million Jews, and it was also another 5.5 million other people. Because when they come for the Jews, they don't stop with the Jews. They'll come after every other people group that stands in their way. If they hate the Jews enough to kill them, then they hate humans enough to annihilate everyone. And that's why we as Christians cannot tolerate anti-Semitism. And I hear the responses from Christians all over the world. I just received an email from a woman from South Africa who told me that anti-Semitism is out of control in South Africa. And she wanted to know how she could get involved, how she could help support and educate her community to stand against anti-Semitism. It's the South African government who accuses Israel of apartheid tactics, South Africa tactics, against the Palestinians when there is no proof, there's no evidence to that. In fact, it's to the contrary. If there's any apartheid being practiced in the Middle East, or at least in Israel and the Palestinian-controlled areas, it's in the PA. It's in Hamas. It's in Gaza. It's in the West, what they call the West Bank, where the Palestinian Authority is. Because if Jews tried to live where the Palestinian Authority is, the Jews would not survive the night. they would be murdered. And we see that by constant attacks. We hear of the knife attacks in Jerusalem where innocent people are stabbed to death. We hear of babies who are stabbed to death. We hear of car rammings where Arabs will run Jews over and kill them. We hear of knife attacks. The Fogel family, a couple of years ago, you all may remember hearing about the Fogel family in Itamar who were butchered. 6 members of the family butchered in their sleep. And the youngest of that family was a mere 2 months of age, sleeping in bed with its parents, and its throat was slit. This is the barbaric enemy that Israel has to face. Israel is not an apartheid state. Israel provides freedom for all of its citizens. Israel allows Muslims, Jews, Bedouins, Christians, all to live in Israel. And they're all protected. Their freedoms are protected. They're able to worship the way they want to worship. They're able to choose what kind of job they want to choose. They're able to move freely about the country. But not so in the Palestinian-controlled areas. Jews can't live there. In fact, the Israeli government warns Jews, and there's big red signs. We were just in Israel. There are big red signs as you're getting ready to go into a Palestinian-controlled area. Jews are warned, do not proceed. If you're Jewish, do not proceed past this boundary, this border, because you basically take your life in your own hands. And most of the world, unfortunately, doesn't hear that message. We were excited last month. Back in February at Florida Atlantic University, we had a group of Israeli reservists. These are young men and women who serve as reservists in the IDF. They serve their duty or serve the government. And there were 3 guys and 2 young girls, and they were Muslim, Christian, Druze, Bedouin, and it was incredible. It was remarkable to hear their stories about how Israel is their country and how they want to defend it. So it's so critically important that we get our news and our information from reliable sources, not from propaganda. And I'm telling you, if you get on Twitter and you follow us on Twitter and look at the stream of some of the propaganda that is being spewed through Twitter. To me, it's mind-boggling. We live in 2018 with all kinds of information that people have access to, and people are communicating a false narrative. And this is so dangerous for us. It's why media is so important. It's why what we do here is so important. It's why documenting information is so critically important, and then pushing that information out there with the truth. Because there are lies out there. There is propaganda and disinformation going on. So this is for you. But I also want to talk about the ongoing attacks against Israel as we get closer to the 70th anniversary, and of course the indoctrination of our children in U.S. schools. As I mentioned, tomorrow is Holocaust Remembrance Day, and here in Nashville, where we're headquartered, Belmont University is actually hosting us to come and talk with the students at the university about the rise of anti-Semitism. Earlier this year, there was a study done by the Anti-Defamation League. They cited a 86% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the United States of America. And we know that the polls show, there was a research poll done last year that said 70% of Americans support Israel in her war on terror. So how can we have 70% of Americans who support Israel as she defends herself from terrorists, and we have 86% increase in anti-Semitism? It's because, ladies and gentlemen, the anti-Semitism is increasing on our college, our higher ed, and our secondary school campuses. Our children in secondary schools are being fed a diet, a slow, steady diet of anti-Israel propaganda that ends up manifesting into anti-Semitism. And of course, because of that anti-Semitism, it's being taken out on the Jewish students. There are swastikas being drawn, carved in on desks. There are comments being written on bathroom walls, "Death to the Jews." These are secondary school kids. This is middle school, elementary school, high school. But it's also occurring on our college campuses. And of course, we're moving into the springtime, and several universities across the country are having their Israel Apartheid Week, where they build their apartheid wall. And of course, the propaganda behind the wall is that they're trying to keep the Arabs out, when in reality, Israel is trying to protect its citizens, which is the role and the responsibility of every government. They are to protect the citizens. They have to keep the terrorists out. And so, of course, the propaganda is written all over these walls. These students that buy into this narrative are handing out propaganda to other students, trying to tell them, and of course they're using the current situation right now with Hamas in Gaza. And of course, the information that's not being provided is that Hamas is using people, innocent civilians, as human shields. They're sending these men, women, and children who are innocent, who are not part of Hamas or part of the terrorist regime, to the front line, so that, and then provoking Israel to attack the fence, and innocent people are being murdered. So where is the outcry from the United Nations? Where are the human rights? Where's the Hague? Where's the International Court of Justice in all of this? It's silent. Nobody is complaining about this. It's like what we saw with the last war, where Hamas was putting innocent families in school buildings and hospitals and then launching missiles from those buildings because they knew Israel would attack those buildings and they would have plenty of collateral damage to show everyone. There was a recent posting about a so-called journalist who was murdered. Come to find out, that so-called journalist was actually a Hamas terrorist who had a shirt with press written on it to make it look like somebody in the press was killed. It was a terrorist. It was a member of Hamas. But this is the propaganda. And of course, if people die, that's the collateral damage. It fuels the propaganda spin of Hamas. So it's important for us to make sure that, again, we're getting reliable, accurate information, not propaganda. So, of course, you'll see some of that if you go to Twitter and you follow us on Twitter. And join me in that discussion. I encourage you. It's always a lot of fun, trust me. That's one of the things I enjoy doing, is tweeting back and forth and calling these liars out for what they are. But anyhow, so we'll be at Belmont Church, but across the country, around the world, there are commemorations and memorials going on to honor the 6 million who perished. Also, I want to talk about the recent news from around the world, as we talked about Hamas continuing its incitement to violence on Israel's border. And of course, one of the, I have a recent article here by the Times of Israel, where U.S. slams Gaza leaders who send children to border knowing they may be killed. And the article starts by saying the White House on Thursday called on Palestinians to engage in solely peaceful protests and stay at least 500 meters from Gaza's border with Israel on the eve of fresh demonstrations supported by Gaza's Hamas terrorist rulers along the border. And ladies and gentlemen, please keep in mind